Hello, welcome to this week's How's the Market, Pensacola. Well, it's the last week of April, and now they're starting to have talks about starting to phase open again. So I'm wondering if this is going to come to an end. I'm also wondering about pent-up demand because we've got some demand happening out there. Had a couple of properties come on listing-wise, and they've been gobbled up within hours, not even days, hours. So I'm wondering how that's going to affect us locally. Well, instead of wondering, let's actually talk about the local. Let's go.
I'm a man on a mission.
My mission is to help people break through all the noise out there and
Don't need no permission.
I want to help you get to actual truth. Don't you just want the truth? All right, for those of you who have actually seen this video or this weekly show that I put on, you know that I always start off with this particular slide right here. It says if we have between 6 and 7 months worth of inventory, it's considered a neutral market. Anything greater than 7 months is considered a buyer's market. Anything less is considered a seller's market. What the slide doesn't say, anything greater than 9 months is considered a hyper seller's market. Excuse me. Got that flipped. Let's do it. See, when you do it over and over and over again, you just sometimes flip them. Anything greater than 9 months is a hyper buyer's market. Anything less than 3 months is a hyper seller's market. Let's take a look at our area here in Escambia and Santa Rosa County. We're starting with Santa Rosa here, and if you notice, we are not a hyper sellers under $500,000 anymore. As a matter of fact, the 400 to 450, although I think some of this data is a little skewed, is creeping up to a neutral market. We're starting to get some inventory. The 50 to 100, we got 14 properties that have come on, so it's pushed it out of hyper sellers and into sellers. I still worry about the 100 to 200, and especially that 150 to 200 range, because there's such an appetite for that in both counties. And if you look, that's not even a month's worth of inventory. So I really want to point this out, especially as people are looking at it from the buyer standpoint, because from the buyer standpoint, I've had people come in at 185, 190 list price wanting to offer 160 because they're trying to claim COVID is going to bring the prices down. There is nothing in the data that shows that at all. I've done a couple of videos on that. There's nothing in the data that shows that. As a matter of fact, it looks like the opposite. It looks like because supply has been constrained a little bit, that we're actually going to see prices start to rise a little. But with less than a month's inventory, if you look right here, it says the list to sale ratio. They're getting between 99 and 100% of list. Same thing between 2 and 250. So as a buyer, if that property is at 185, I wouldn't come in at 160. Unless it is drastically overpriced. Are there exceptions? Sure. But if the property's been on the market 3 days, we go highest and best, the property's listed at 185 and you think you're going to get it at 170, you're just not. I know that's harsh, and sometimes I have to have those harsh conversations with clients. Most of those clients that I have those harsh conversations wind up being friends because they figure out that I'm not going to blow smoke. I'm just going to tell you the truth. And what's the whole purpose behind this particular show is to give you the data so you can make the decisions based off of the data, based off the math, instead of based off emotions. Although I know buying a home is an emotional buy, logically, there are some things that need to be taken into consideration. If you're looking in Santa Rosa County between 150 and 200, you might want to be able to be willing to give what people are asking because they're going to get it right now. Excuse me. Let's continue on. Between 250 and 350, we've gotten a little over 3 months, so it's not quite a hyper sellers, but it's right there at the hyper sellers. And I'll tell you what that is. That is new builds. I've seen a lot of new builds come on the market, and boy, talk about some incentives right now. Going into the second quarter, when we entered into the second quarter here in April, some of these builders have got huge incentives. Now, if you notice, the permits to build nationwide actually went way down. I talked about that a couple of weeks ago. But we've got huge incentives to buy new builds and close by the end of the second quarter. It's just the builders trying to protect a quarterly revenue. So it's all coming down to economics on that, but you can take advantage of that. So if you're looking to buy, call me, because we can get you some huge, huge advantages right now. Some stuff they're not advertising. They're only advertising to a select amount of realtors that done enough business with them to make sense. So I can get you some huge deals there. Between 350 and 400, back down to a hyper sellers. 4 to 450 in Santa Rosa County, it is a seller's market, but just barely. It's almost a neutral market. So now if you're in the 4 to 450 range, and we're talking this week, you and I need to have a conversation about pricing, and we need to have a conversation about marketing. Are we going to market just to digital tours? There's a place in the MLS to where I can just do digital tours now. Okay. Understand that's going to market things differently. So 4 to 450 is a seller's, but just barely. 450 to 500, creeping back down to a hyper seller's, but it's just a seller's according to our definition. And between 5 and 550, a hyper seller's. But then between 500 or 550 and 600, a hyper buyer's. So I talk about, there's usually one of these price points every week. Sometimes it varies. It's up and down on this scale on where that is. Right now, if it's at 550. If you're at 550 in Santa Rosa County, you have got a decision to make. You and I need to have a conversation about how we're going to market it, how we're going to price it. Because one is a hyper seller's, one is a hyper buyer's. And there's two drastically different marketing plans there. So pay attention to that. 6 to 650 is slightly over and neutral, so it skews more towards the buyers. 650 to 700, almost a hyper seller's. Not much inventory there. There's only 7 properties total, with one of them under contract. 700 plus is still a year's inventory in Santa Rosa County. Let's sneak over the border to Escambia County. Looks like everything under 250 is still a hyper seller's, with everything under 500 still being a seller's. Either a seller's or a hyper seller's. But that 550 mark was the mark for Santa Rosa County. 500 is the mark for Escambia. Because 499.99 or 500 is almost a hyper seller's, but it is a seller's. But 500 to 550 is a hyper buyer's. Again, I'm just trying to give you the data so you know how to make the decisions. 550 to 600, still considered a hyper buyer's. 600 to 650, sellers, not quite a hyper sellers. 650 to 700, a buyer's, and 700 plus, a hyper buyer. So there's our numbers. It's going to be a quick episode this week. I think there's going to be a lot of changes. They're starting to talk about different phases of opening the state back up. I think we'll see the governor mention something about that later on this week. I guess we'll just kind of pay attention to that. Be curious to see how that works. I know that almost all of Florida is wanting the beaches back open. But if we do get them back open, do that whole social distancing thing. All right, we need to keep this under wraps as much as we can. And I think with the opening is more of the medical community being able to sustain more. But that's a whole conspiracy thing that I'm not even going to get into. Anyways, if you're considering buying or selling, give me a call. Shoot me a message on this. I know this information is providing some value. So if I've brought any value to you, at least give me a shot to work with you. I know I can do a good job. Thanks for watching. Have a great week.
I'm a man on a mission.
My mission is to help people break through all the noise out there. And
Don't need no permission.
I want to help you get to actual truth.
On a mission.
Don't you just want the truth?